I knew something had shifted the morning my daughter-in-law redecorated my living room without asking me. Not a phone call. Not a text. I came downstairs to find my mother's rocking chair sitting out on the front porch in the Georgia heat, and a new sectional sofa, cream-colored, enormous, wedged against the wall where 40 years of family photographs used to hang. My name is Patricia. I am 67 years old. I taught third grade at Maplewood Elementary for 31 years, and I raised my son Marcus on my own after his father passed. I know what it means to give everything you have to someone and ask for nothing back. I did it gladly. I would do it again. But that morning, standing in my own living room staring at bare walls and strange furniture, I felt something I had not felt since the day the hospital called about my husband. I felt like a guest in a place that was supposed to be mine. It had not always been this way. When Marcus married Nicole 3 years ago, I was genuinely happy for him. She was sharp, well-dressed, laughed easily. At the wedding, I held her hand and told her she was gaining a mother, not losing a son. She smiled at me with very white teeth and said that meant the world to her. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. The first year was fine. They had an apartment across town. Marcus called on Sundays. Nicole sent me a birthday card with a sunflower on it. Small things, but they felt real. Then the lease on their apartment ended, and Nicole decided she wanted a house. Not just any house. A specific house, 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, in the Sycamore Hills neighborhood, where the school district was rated highly, and the neighbors had the kind of lawns that looked like magazine covers. The asking price was well beyond what Marcus's salary at the logistics company could support, and Nicole had just left her marketing job to, as she put it, focus on building their life together. Marcus called me on a Tuesday evening. I remember because I had just poured myself a glass of sweet tea and sat down to watch the news. "Mom," he said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to really think about it before you say no." I told him I was listening. He explained it carefully, the way he used to explain things when he was 12 years old and wanted something he wasn't sure I would agree to. The house required a co-signer. His credit was good, but not quite good enough on its own. "Just my name on the paperwork," he said. "I wouldn't have to pay anything. It was just a formality." I sat there holding my sweet tea and looking at the evening news playing silently, because I had forgotten to turn the volume on, and I thought about all the mornings I had packed his lunch. All the overtime shifts I had worked when the school district froze salaries. All the things I had done without, so he could have new shoes for basketball tryouts. I said yes. 2 months later, they moved into the house on Birchwood Lane. 6 months after that, Marcus called again. The mortgage payments were harder than they expected. Nicole had some credit card debt from before the marriage that was making things tight. Would I be willing to help out? Just temporarily? Just until she found a new position? I was still living in my own house then, a 3-bedroom on Oleander Street that I had owned outright since my husband's life insurance paid off the last of the mortgage 14 years ago. I had my teacher's pension. I was comfortable, not wealthy. I helped. I told myself it was temporary. The third ask came 4 months after that. The water heater at Birchwood Lane had failed. The repair was $1,200. Marcus said they were stretched thin that month. I wrote the check. It was Nicole's mother who first suggested, with tremendous warmth and what I can only describe as careful casualness, that it might make more sense for me to simply move in with Marcus and Nicole. After all, my house was too large for one person. "Think of the savings," she said. "Think of the convenience." And there was a lovely guest room at the end of the hall that got wonderful afternoon light. I should have paid closer attention to the word guest. I put my house on Oleander Street into a rental arrangement. I was not ready to sell it. Something in me resisted that, and I moved into the guest room at Birchwood Lane in the spring. The first few months I told myself the arrangement was working. I cooked dinner 3 or 4 nights a week. I drove my granddaughter, their 5-year-old Lily, to her preschool program on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. I stayed out of Nicole's way when she was working from home, which became more frequent after she started what she called a consulting side business that I never fully understood. I bought my own groceries and kept them on a designated shelf in the refrigerator because Nicole had explained, very reasonably, that it was easier to track meal planning that way. I vacuumed the upstairs hallway because otherwise it didn't get vacuumed. I did not say anything about the rocking chair on the porch. I brought it back inside when no one was home and placed it in my room. The shift came so gradually that I cannot point to a single moment when the balance tipped. It was more like watching the light change in late afternoon. You don't notice it happening, and then suddenly the room is dim and you can't read anymore. Nicole began leaving me notes on the kitchen counter. Small requests at first. Could I make sure to run the dishwasher before I went to bed? Could I remember to take Lily's lunchbox out and wash it when I picked her up? Could I please not use the good towels in the downstairs bathroom for the dog, even though we didn't have a dog, she meant, when I dried my hands after gardening? The notes multiplied. They found their way onto the refrigerator, the bathroom mirror, the laundry room door. Marcus never left me notes. Marcus barely spoke to me directly anymore. When I was in the room, he was pleasant and distracted in the way that people are when they are standing next to someone they have decided not to really see. There was one evening in November when I had made a pot of vegetable soup, a real one, the kind that takes most of the afternoon, with dried beans soaked overnight and a ham hock and sweet corn cut fresh off the cob. I had made it for all of us. When Nicole came downstairs with Marcus, she looked at the pot, then looked at me, and said she and Marcus were actually going to order Thai food tonight because Marcus had had a long day and needed something fun. They ordered enough for the two of them, and Lily. I ate my soup alone at the kitchen table while the three of them watched a movie in the family room. I could hear them laughing. I washed my bowl and dried it and put it away. I walked upstairs. I sat on the edge of my bed in the room with the afternoon light, and I looked at my hands for a long time. The moment that changed everything came on a Thursday in February. It had been a long week. I had come down with a winter cold that left me foggy and tired, and I had still driven Lily to preschool and picked her up because Nicole had a call she couldn't move. I had still made sure the laundry was rotated. I had still fed the neighbor's cat, which I had somehow become responsible for during the woman's trip to visit her sister. That evening, Nicole's friends came over for dinner. I had not been told they were coming. I came downstairs at 6:30, expecting to make myself something simple, and the kitchen was full of women I had met once or twice, all of them talking over each other, and the counter was covered in wine bottles and charcuterie boards, and the expensive cheese Nicole kept in the drawer she had asked me not to use. Nicole saw me standing in the doorway and said, brightly, in the voice she used when she needed me to do something, that she had actually already set a plate aside for me. She pointed to a covered dish on the far end of the counter, near the door to the garage. I lifted the cover. It was leftover pasta from the night before, cold. The women were all looking at me. Nicole had already turned back to her friends. I put the cover back on the plate. I said I wasn't very hungry. I went upstairs. I lay on my bed and stared at the ceiling for a long time. I thought about my mother's rocking chair. I thought about the note on the laundry room door. I thought about the word guest. I thought about my name on the mortgage papers for a house where I was being served cold, leftover pasta, while the woman who lived in my son's home entertained her friends with expensive cheese. I thought about my house on Oleander Street, still mine, still sitting there with its good bones and its yard and its address that had my name on it. I did not cry. I was past crying. What I felt was something quieter and more certain, the way the air feels just before sunrise when the birds haven't started yet and the whole world is still and waiting. I got up and found my reading glasses. I sat at the small desk in the corner of my room where I kept my important papers. I opened the bottom drawer and took out the folder where I had kept my documents since before Marcus was born. Pension statements, property tax records, the deed to the house on Oleander Street, the cosigner paperwork for Birchwood Lane. I read everything carefully. Then I opened my laptop and I wrote down 3 phone numbers: my attorney, my financial advisor, and the property management company that handled my rental on Oleander Street. I did not make any calls that night. I closed the laptop, got into bed, and slept better than I had in months. I called my attorney first thing Friday morning from my car in the parking lot of the Publix, 2 miles from Birchwood Lane, because I had learned that phone calls made in the house had a way of being overheard. Her name was Deborah, and I had used her for my husband's estate and once for a property dispute with a neighbor, and she was the kind of woman who asked exactly the right questions and did not try to talk you out of anything before she understood the full picture. I told her everything: the co-signing, the money I had given, the situation with the house on Oleander Street, what I wanted to do. She was quiet for a moment after I finished. Then she said, "Patricia, how soon do you want to move?" I told her I wanted to go home. What I had not known, until Deborah explained it, was that a co-signer on a mortgage has certain rights that go along with the responsibilities. I had signed my name onto a significant financial obligation. I had also, over the past 18 months, contributed documented funds toward the household. Deborah was careful and thorough. She told me what I could do and what I could not do, and what I should document going forward. I spent Friday afternoon in my car in various parking lots, making careful calls. I spoke to my financial advisor, a calm man named Gerald who had managed my pension investments for 12 years. I told him what I needed to do, and he told me how to do it cleanly. What was mine had always been only mine. I had never added Marcus or Nicole to any of my accounts, a fact that I had never thought much about but that Deborah told me was fortunate. I spoke to the property management company. The tenants in my Oleander Street house had given notice the month before. The house was going to be empty in 6 weeks. I sat in my car outside a nail salon on Cascade Road, and I felt, for the first time, in a very long time, like a woman with a plan. I was careful over the next few weeks. I did not change anything visible. I continued to drive Lily to preschool. I continued to cook dinner some evenings. I was pleasant. I was quiet. I was exactly what they expected me to be, and I used that invisibility the way I had once used the small hours of the morning when Marcus was a baby and the whole house was asleep to do the things that mattered. I had one ally, though I had not looked for one. Marcus and Nicole's neighbor across the street was a woman named June, 72 years old, retired from the post office, who had introduced herself to me the week I moved in, and who had a habit of walking her small dog past the house at the same time every morning. June had seen more than I realized. She had, in the careful and unassuming way of observant women, understood the shape of what was happening inside that house without my ever having to describe it. One morning in March, as I was bringing in the mail, June stopped at the end of the driveway. She looked at me steadily for a moment. Then she said, "How's your house on Oleander holding up?" I asked her how she knew about Oleander Street. She smiled and said she'd lived in this neighborhood for 22 years and knew everybody's business eventually. I told her the tenants had just moved out. She nodded slowly, still looking at me. "Well," she said, "that's good timing, isn't it?" It wasn't a question. I looked at her for a moment. "Yes," I said, "I think it is." She walked on with her dog. That was all. But something about being seen, really seen, without explanation or justification steadied me in a way I had not expected. The conversation that confirmed everything came the second Saturday in March. I had not planned to overhear it. I was in the laundry room at the back of the house, transferring a load, and the heating vent that ran along the baseboard connected to the kitchen in a way that none of us had ever talked about, but that I had quietly noted months before. Nicole was on the phone with someone, her mother, I think, from the easy, familiar tone. I stood very still and listened. She was talking about the house, about what would happen to it, about what my name on the mortgage meant and did not mean in practical terms. She said, with the casual confidence of someone who has been thinking about this for a long time, That as long as things stayed stable, there was no reason I would ever need to do anything with my name on the paperwork. That I was comfortable where I was. That Marcus handled me well. Handled. I stood there, with a warm pillowcase in my hands, and I thought about 31 years of third graders who had come into my classroom not knowing how to read and left knowing how. I thought about the parent who cried at the end of Marcus's second grade year because she said I had changed her son's life. I thought about my husband on our wedding day, the way he had looked at me like I was something worth protecting. I folded the pillowcase. I put it in the basket. I carried the basket upstairs. I called Deborah on Monday. I moved back to Oleander Street on a Thursday in April, which is the month the dogwood trees bloom in Georgia, and the air smells like something beginning rather than ending. I did not leave in anger. That is important to me. I packed my things over several days while Marcus was at work, and Nicole was on her calls, and I was almost entirely finished before either of them noticed what was happening. It was Lily who came to find me first, padding into the guest room in her socks on a Wednesday evening to ask why my books were in boxes. I sat down on the edge of the bed, and I took her small face in my hands and I told her that Grandma was going back to her own house, and that her own house had a yard with a fig tree and a porch swing and a kitchen that was always going to be open to her. She climbed into my lap, and we sat there for a while. Nicole appeared in the doorway. She looked at the boxes. She looked at me. Something moved across her face that was too complex to name easily. She said carefully, "Patricia, what's going on?" I told her I was going home. I said it simply, without accusation, the way you state a fact about the weather. She said they had talked about this arrangement being long-term. She said Marcus was going to want to talk about this. She said, and here her voice took on a quality I had not heard from her before, something thin and careful, that my name was on a mortgage. I told her I was aware of that. I told her Deborah would be in touch. I want to tell you that there was a dramatic scene, because that is what these moments are supposed to contain. But there wasn't. Nicole sat down on the edge of the bed across from me, and Lily was between us, and for a moment we were just two women on either side of a child, and neither of us said anything. Marcus came home at 6:30 and found the three of us in the guest room. He stood in the doorway looking at the boxes and at me, and I watched something move through him that was slow and real and did not have a name yet. He sat down on the floor, which surprised me. He sat on the floor the way he used to as a little boy, when something was too large to take standing up, and he put his head in his hands. I waited. He said he was sorry. He said it the way someone says it when they mean it, but don't fully understand yet what they're apologizing for. Which is not the complete apology, but it is the beginning of one. He said he didn't know when things had gotten so far from what he intended. He said he missed me. I told him I loved him. I told him that was not in question, and never had been. I also told him that I was going home, that Deborah would be in touch regarding the Birchwood Lane paperwork, that I expected things to be handled properly and completely, that I had every document I needed. Nicole was very quiet through all of this. Lily fell asleep on the bed between us, her small hand open on the comforter. I drove to Oleander Street the next morning with my last boxes. The house smelled a little closed up, the way houses do when they've been lived in by someone else for a while, and I opened every window in every room and let the April air come through. I found my cast-iron skillet in the cabinet, where I had left it 3 years ago. I made myself scrambled eggs and toast and coffee, and I ate at my own kitchen table, in my own kitchen, in my own house, with the window open and the dogwood branches just visible at the corner of the yard. The coffee tasted different than it had in months. Better, or maybe just like itself again. I called June that afternoon to thank her for nothing in particular, and she laughed in the way of a woman who understands exactly why she is being thanked. There are things I know now that I wish I had understood years earlier. The most important one is this: love that costs you your dignity is not love any longer, at some point. It is a habit. It is a system. It is a very old and very common arrangement that benefits everyone in it except the person who should matter most. I know that my son is a good man who forgot, for a while, what he had been taught. I know that forgetting is not the same as being lost, and that some people have to live with the consequences of something before they can fully understand what they did. I know that understanding is a process and not an event. Marcus calls me on Sunday evenings now. The calls have been different since April, quieter, more careful, with longer pauses in them. He asks how the fig tree is doing. He asks about my garden. Last Sunday, he asked if he could bring Lily over on Saturday, just Lily, to see the porch swing. I told him yes. I told him to come around 11, and I would have lunch ready. I hung up the phone and sat on my porch for a while, in the late evening, in the good, warm Georgia air that smells like cut grass and something blooming I can't identify, and I thought about all the things I had given away over the past 3 years, and all the things I had, without fully realizing it, kept. I kept my house. I kept my name, clean and clear, on the deed where it belongs. I kept my pension, my accounts, my files in the bottom drawer. But more than any of that, I kept the knowledge of who I am. That knowledge is not loud. It does not announce itself. It sits quietly in a woman at a kitchen table with a cup of coffee and an open window, watching the dogwood in the yard, present in her own life, in her own home, on her own terms. That is what I came back to. That is what was always mine. And I want you to know, if you are sitting somewhere right now and something in this story feels familiar, if you recognize the notes on the refrigerator, or the plate of cold leftovers, or the particular silence of being in a room full of people who have decided not to see you, I want you to know that you are not wrong about what you feel. You are not being too sensitive. You are not asking for too much. You deserve a seat at the table. Your own table. And it is never too late to go home.